Hi everyone, welcome back to Memories for the People. I'm George Farrar and I'm pleased to bring you our first regular show, and it's about Generation X. With the lights out, it's less dangerous. Here we are now, entertain us. Here we see Nirvana. I consider them to be the best musical group from my generation. They hit big in the 1990s, in the early 1990s, and their music had a profound effect on my life. Now, I'm Generation X, born in the mid-70s, so I'm somewhat in the middle towards the latter phase of what people term as Generation X. And here, I pulled some graphics for you so we can take a look at where Generation X fits with everything. We have the baby boomers that were born after World War II through 1964. Generation X, born in the years ranging from 1965 to 1981. Generation Y, now commonly called the millennials, born in the years 1982 through 2002. And then later on, of course, we have Generation Z. And now I'm going to throw in a little bit of snark. There's going to be some slight levels of sarcasm. So bear with me as we talk about where I see my role and the role of Generation X and in the broader American society. And here we're going to have these slides that are going to show all these different words, phrases. When we look at it, we look at the big words seem to be, it's a demographic. Self-reliant, work, debt, outcomes. So people are trying with the generations always to get a grasp of who are these people that came of age. And a lot of it depends upon when you came of age. So, I'm going to be presenting to you a lot of material, a lot of it already pre-prepared by others, because I was just too lazy to create it myself, right? But I'm going to throw it together for you after having pried myself off the couch to bring it to you, to take all of this information, synthesize it, and talk about it with you. Now, you'll see a lot of repeats in this word salad, so to speak, this butterfly of words. One thing that jumps out, you might see as latchkey kid. I had a brief period of time growing up, well, actually later on, a rather prominent period of time, where I was a latchkey kid. Came home, no one was home, did my homework, watched TV, fooled around on the computer, and waited for my parents to come home. My first bout of that was in the mid-'80s. Then for a period of time, I had my stepmother and I had my grandmother, and then starting again in the early 90s when things really got to going. I was a latchkey kid. Okay, people were out working, trying to make my life better. In a lot of ways, I would say I'm independent, right? But you'll see as we talk a little bit more where I get my cynicism from. In the work world, people look at Generation X and I think see a lot of team players that are adaptable. You have to be pragmatic, but in today's world, you have to be somewhat skeptical, especially in today's world. Now, Generation X was a term coined by an author named Douglas Coupland, and in preparation for this show, I didn't even bother to read the book. Okay? Generation X, Tales for an Accelerated Culture. To this day, I still haven't gotten around to reading it. I guess one of these days I'll pry myself off the couch and make the world a better place. I'm a big reader, but I tend to read a lot of nonfiction. This happens to be a fiction book. And it tries to capture, through characters at that time, what Generation X was, and you could say is. Here's a quote. This generation is underemployed, intensely private, and unpredictable. I definitely agree with the private and unpredictable part. I think a lot of us in Generation X have finally gotten around to some good work out there. But in today's world, not everything goes on your Facebook news feed. And people may sometimes look at my life and see a lot of stability, but sometimes there are periods of unpredictability. So this book tried to coin an explanation for this generation, a generation fueled by the collapse of the Berlin Wall and individual computing, personal computing coming of age, where you could actually create, write, eventually later blog, later on vlog. And meanwhile, if you got bored, well, there was always MTV back in the day when they actually played music videos. So in the 90s, people were hitting their 20s, and people were saying, hey, you know, what's going on with these people? And that's the main thing you're going to hear a lot throughout your life, no matter who you are. The boomers heard it, Generation X has heard it, the millennials have definitely heard it. What's up with these people? Who are they? And the one thing I'll point out to you is that Generation X is like a valley between two mountains, the mountain of baby boomers and the mountain of millennials, so far as the population of the demographic. Later on this channel, I'll be focusing on various movies that were big in the 1980s and that really got my mind going. I discovered teen angst before I even became a teenager. You began when you watched a movie like The Breakfast Club to see some of the dysfunction in people's lives, though it was acted and these were characters. The dysfunction in these people's lives, in these characters' lives, that didn't jibe with what you would always be seeing in those situation comedies, like and those shows like Leave It to Beaver from the 1950s and The Brady Bunch from the 1960s. You began to see a complexity, and John Hughes in his films presented that. Here in Wargames, you get exposed, and I saw at a young age, the power of computing and how it would interface with society and with government, and in this case, with the military in this movie. I really enjoyed Wargames. I watched it in the 1980s in the movie theater, saw it with my family, and the movie of all of them, it really blew my mind. Now, talk about blowing your mind. Let's talk a little bit about Woodstock. Now, I do want to look back at the boomers, and I want to do a cross comparison between Woodstock festivals. Okay, so Woodstock in 1969 was this amazing musical festival. Approximately 400,000 people gathered in upstate New York. They had Jimi Hendrix, okay? Now, they tried to do retrospective festivals in the 90s. Woodstock 94 was good. Here we have Woodstock 99, and we got Limp Bizkit, and there's Fred Durst. And, you know, good music, but you got the feeling in 1999 that things were not maybe going to be as great in how things were portrayed from prior years on television, okay? There wasn't going to be that necessary, that peace and love, right, that everyone seemed to be striving for in the 60s. Now we all know the realities is that there wasn't a lot of peace and love in the 60s, but I can tell you because I saw this, I watched it live watching MTV. Woodstock 99 descended into chaos, and I was actually working on it was called an action report. It was going to finish up my master's degree, and I was going to go down to the library and work to finish up some things on it. I shortened my trip down to the library, and I spent most of that evening watching the people set fires and just destroy things, destroyed essentially what was left of the festival because people were overcharging for water on a very hot day. You know, I think it was in 1999 that I began to think that maybe the future and the way things were going to be was not going to be as grand or as peaceful or as filled with joy as I would have hoped, what you would dream about. And of course, then September 11th, 2001 came, and it was something that all the generations alive on that day would see one of the biggest tragedies in our nation's history, with so many people dead. And I visited the World Trade Center in 1997 and in 1998, and you have to imagine what happens then from this point, right? Traveling will never be the same. Going to the airport, getting on an airplane will never be the same. We start to get this level of paranoia. We get this second war in Iraq. We get Afghanistan. We get the Department of Homeland Security. We get these obsessions about things. We get the violence. We start to see more violence, more violent outbursts. We see the Great Recession of 2008 that the millennials will come of age into. So, in this show, I didn't paint you some pretty rosy picture, okay? I wear glasses, but they're not rose-colored. And we come of age. I came of age in the 90s. And I was still striving, right? And then that happens. Now, I'm going to be focusing in my next show on this channel about one of my favorite movies from the 1980s, Wargames, starring Matthew Broderick. But I want to talk a little bit about it as we wrap up the show today, because I think the one thing that I really got out of this show, out of this movie, and I'll tell you about on this show, is that you can never underestimate the power of one or a couple people with a computer sometimes to wreak havoc. You know, some people say, life's a game, right? And in this movie, of course, the computer asks, shall we play a game? And I think a lot of times people will look at generations and pit people against people, boomers against millennials, generation against X against everyone else. And there is such a futility when you think about it, a futility in all the rat race, you might call it, right? Sometimes if you think you can win, right, you're going to strive. If you think you're going to have, let's say you're going to have a really good YouTube channel, you're going to put a lot of energy into it. If you think you're going to be able to get a lot out of social media, you're going to put a lot of stuff into Facebook. But sometimes, as the computer program discovers in this movie, which I'll talk about in our next show, it discovers that sometimes the winning move is not to play. And in this case, they have the computer playing tic-tac-toe. And then, of course, we know how it figures out through learning, right? Through computer learning. This movie was about computer learning. But if you think about it, we're wedging a lot of our mind and essentially, I'm uploading this conversation, my mind, into YouTube, and I'm putting all this stuff out on Facebook, and I've been doing it for a good long time. And I think you can maybe extrapolate too, is that our brain is a computer, right? I feel sometimes when we dream, a lot of times our brain at night, our brain is trying to sort through things. It's trying to file things away. And sometimes, right, when you realize that so much is brought up against you, and you can keep trying to do all these things, but there is not going to be a winner, right? You learn, right? If you're not good at football, right, at some point you stop playing football, right? So we'll talk more about Wargames, and we'll be talking more about different movies that I've enjoyed in the past. But for those of you out there who play it, there's always a nice game of chess to be played. So when you look at it in American society, you have to, I've found, speaking for myself and for what I like to think generally, just out here on YouTube running my mouth, that sometimes you encounter that strange game, and the only winning move is not to play. But eventually you settle on a nice game of chess. And while the people around you fight, Democrats, Republicans, far right, far left, race, gender, stereotypes, in a world where everyone is fighting, right? All you can do, right, and no matter what generation you are, all you can do is be yourself. Okay, well, I threw a little bit of opinion in this one, but I hope that this jogs some good memories with you. Please subscribe. Please share this. Please tell me what you think. The best is yet to come on Memories for the People. I have other YouTube channels and other things I'll be telling you about. I'm very excited about what I've put together here today and what I'll be bringing you in the future. Thanks for watching. Take it easy. See you later.